Evening, everybody. So this is our final session, the conference wrap, where I've asked some of our key stakeholders to join a session where they share their thoughts on how the day has gone. And before I ask them to share their thoughts, I thought I would share mine. Looking at what the many different sessions and many different speakers have said, it struck me that, I mean, obviously COVID has been a very significant change to the way that we all work. And I think that teaching and working remotely has been a pretty steep learning curve for most, not all, interestingly. And I think that the challenges that seem to have emerged are around missing out on that rite of passage of getting your hands on the hardware that will shape your career, challenges in recruiting, challenges in mentoring and in pastoral care, possibly for students facing higher degrees of anxiety and much lower degrees of socialization during lockdown or social distancing. But I also heard that COVID had been a trigger for a lot of innovation and that it provides opportunities for deeper industry engagement, the supply of remotely trained students who might be ready to start more quickly, and the possibility, I was intrigued to hear that one of our speakers, I think it was Sharon, talking about how anecdotally there were stories of some more diverse candidates finding the process of interviewing and onboarding more accessible, which is really positive. I think one of the discussions that I want to have with this group is about whether we think that these changes are going to be permanent. Some seem to think that they were a sea change, that, and some thought that that might be an interim before getting back to some degree of normality, and some seem to think that it was a very necessary change. It was really good to hear from the students themselves and young interns, and hear about some of the different and very valuable skill sets, not just from the HE graduates, but also from the FE graduates. And it seemed as if we kept coming back to one of the big topics of last year around internships and apprenticeships that seemed to be not only successful for the companies rolling those out, but also transformational for the students. I'm not sure what philosopher came up with the idea that because we all work in such a fast changing industry that effectively we're all apprentices our entire careers in games, but I rather like that observation. And I think we heard also in the diversity session, again, about the need for early intervention, about reducing unconscious bias and leadership from the top, and the need to celebrate our successes. I'm going to ask all of our panelists in this final session to share some of the key takeaways that they had from today. And I'm going to start with you, Aurore, if you can get us going.
Yes, sure. And if you don't mind, I've taken a lot of notes, so I'm going to be looking down occasionally to check that I'm on track. I think today has been fantastic. I've absolutely loved being in the sessions that I was able to. A lot of choice had to be made because I wish I could duplicate myself for some of the tracks. But so I kind of got the key takeaways of everything that I've kind of had attended, which I think gives a big overarching story of today's overall thoughts. So really starting with the amazing apprentices and interns, that was really great. And the notion of we're all still learning, we all still feel, at least professionals in the industry, we all feel like we're apprentices of our own trade at all times. And that feels and I feel like that may need to be normalized a little bit more because everybody's learning all the time, even if you're in a senior role, which is very important. I think with particularly breaking the glass ceiling, sorry, I'm moving on quite quickly, what really stood out to me was the phrase, and it was about communication of companies being very open about what they're doing internally for equality and and openness was the frosted glass door, which I thought was so, it's not only already a barrier, but, you know, trying to get companies to be more open about what they're doing. So it is easier for students to be able to choose what they're, the companies that they work for and what will be right for them is vastly important. So bridging the skills gap, with that, there was a lot of talk for me about identifying specialization. And what was really interesting to me, obviously, like I'm part of Unity, but, you know, even at Unity, we're aware that there is a need to transfer skills or to understand skills from commercial game engines to internal game engines and internal tools and processes, because that's not always one-to-one. And that can sometimes be a barrier for students coming from university, learning these tools, and then coming into industry and maybe some of the bigger studios and going, oh, this isn't what I quite learned, like this is very different. So I think it's important to address those as well, and even us as tools providers, like to say like, hey, actually here's some strange internal processes, not strange but very customized, that may be different, and here's how they map. And then, sorry if I'm taking too long, really about, I found it very interesting from the policy in games, the push-pull between, you know, only there's 3 years of time and that's not a lot to teach these professions. And so the push-pull between, do we teach ethics in game design versus programming and these core skills that are needed? And yeah, I feel like there still needs to be solutions around that, because I feel that's very important for people maybe creating their own businesses. And then, yeah, so where am I at? There's so much to take away, but really, so to wrap it all up for me, there's a lot of talk about a more blended approach. I heard that term a lot, and not just in education, but also for working and also for internships. And there's been great success in that I've heard. So really, of the key words that I kind of took away today is blended success and communication, which is quite important. So I think that's me. Hopefully that wasn't too long.
No, fantastic. That was really useful. I'm going to hand over to going around the Zoom call by asking Ian to pick up some points that struck you today.
Thanks, Rick. Yeah, I just echo. I think it's been a very interesting day. Lots of different people speaking about kind of lots of different things. I think the easiest way, I think, for me to break it down is probably to maybe think about positives and negatives. And I don't mean negatives as in things that we can't solve, but just issues that have probably cropped up. So I think the biggest positive for me was certainly the panel with Arthur and Matt and from Priestley College and the apprentices. I know there was a double strand at that point, so it's if you've not seen that, then I would urge anybody to go and have a listen, because that, to me, what those guys have managed to achieve in terms of actually getting apprentices into Traveller's Tales, into one of the largest UK studios, and actually turning them into employees at the end of that from FE, is a fantastic achievement. Super inspiring. I think it's the one thing that is massively missing from the education piece at the moment. I think we know there are issues around graduates and degree courses and everything else, but certainly FE, there's a real missing piece of the jigsaw there. So I think the fact that they've managed to create some employees from that is fantastic. And hopefully I can follow up with them after and help them get that story told to a wider audience. That was really impressive. It shows that it can be done, and it was even done during COVID as well. So they've got brand new interns that had never worked in a game studio, working for a game studio remotely from an FE college. So that was a fantastic thing, very positive for me. Let's have a look. Positivity, I think the other positives really, I think, is just the general feeling that I think universities have responded really, really well to the situation. I think my overarching sort of fear, as I've looked at the media and looked at the news, is that schools in general have been quite reluctant to kind of change and make changes and sort of adapt to what they need to do. Whereas it feels to me that universities have just kind of cracked on and just got on with it, the same as probably the industry have. I think they've realised they've had to find a way, and it looks to me like the courses are going to go ahead, the teaching is going to happen, they're going to find a way, listening to people like Paul speaking about how they know they've got different students that want different experiences, and it just sounds like they're just going to figure it out and get it done. And that to me is very positive. It's a really good attitude that's come across today from the universities. A couple of worries, I suppose, or negatives that I think maybe we need to keep an eye on, and all work together to try and perhaps make sure that these don't come to reality. I think it was Alan from staffs that talked about sort of an increased amount of anxiety and a social isolation from the student point of view. I've seen that here with my staff, so I can sympathise, and I can imagine that younger members of, if you like, the population are going to struggle even more, and I think that's a worry, and I think that the thing that worries me attached to that is I know that from a recruitment point of view, studios, one of the major issues that they have when it comes to hiring graduates is that they complain that the students aren't kind of work ready, they're not socially kind of ready to come into the workplace, they find it a struggle to adapt to that kind of, if you like, just to the working life. And I think that it's probably going to be even harder if they've spent more time isolated and not surrounded by people, really, even if it's other students and academics and in the student union, whatever that may be. That can only be a helpful sort of transition away from sort of being a student, if you like, into being into a working adult. So that's a bit of a worry, which I think maybe we need to keep an eye on. And the only other thing that worries me slightly, I think it's something that cropped up with Andrew Oliver's last sort of panel, was where I think we do need to keep an eye on the kind of working from home, getting back into the studios, and just keeping an eye on where the jobs might go. I am slightly worried that if we all decide that we're going to lock ourselves away and not go back to studios, I think that's great, and I think there needs to be some flexibility going forwards. But my only worry is that studios and companies will naturally find maybe where the cheapest labour could be found, and I don't want that to have a detrimental effect on certainly jobs in the UK or Europe or those kind of places. So that's certainly something that cropped up today, and it's something that's crossed my mind a few times, is that we do need to be careful, because that clearly has an impact on the employability prospects of the students that we're trying to educate and get that education right for them. So yeah, a few positives and a few negatives, if that's all right, Rick.
That's great, thank you, Ian. Sharon, what are your takeaways?
Well, firstly, thank you all very much for today. It's been fantastic. Thank you, Rick, and all the people involved behind the scenes, secretly making it all be so good. I've found the whole day absolutely riveting, and really so much. It's overwhelming, the amount of content that we've covered. So I did find that Jake Habgood's case studies with those students and graduates was particularly powerful. I thought that going forward, that's something that perhaps we might think of doing more of. Having those students' voices was really, they were so articulate and so insightful, and so serious young people who were very serious about play and games, and it was really lovely to hear their voices. I think some of the things in a more general way that have come up for me are around fairness and unfairness, and issues of, for example, sorry if I'm reading from my notes, but there was so much that I had to scribble. I've used the whole notebook today. Anyway, so tech poverty, that was very, that came across very clearly, both for students but also for children through the Digital Schoolhouse project. Internet poverty, which is really very important for students. I think that's potentially a great danger for young people who just don't have the setup at home, who are going to be expected to work from their accommodation. Actual student poverty, which is really very worrying, because students have now entered a kind of culture of working their way through university to support themselves, while university is very expensive as an undertaking, and I think that is a serious concern, and they won't have those jobs, necessarily those casual jobs, in order to support themselves. And I think those well-being questions can't feed into that from Ian, the well-being of students and young people should be a real concern. I do think that glass doors, ceilings, and any other kind of architectural feature made of glass that prevents people from coming into opportunities that, you know, would benefit them is also an issue of fairness and unfairness, and the idea of unconscious bias that we all carry. We need to kind of continue to question that, and as somebody said very early on, ask uncomfortable questions continuously. Just confront things head on. I think, Aurore, you were saying that very early on at the beginning. We need to confront those issues head on, and today seemed to me to be a really wonderful example of how you can have uncomfortable conversations, but in a really positive way. This may be a little bit presumptuous, but I've got some things that I thought maybe we could talk about at the next conference, and those all conveniently fit into a kind of family of ideas. So the first was communication. That's come up in lots of panels. Skills for students, so communication skills for students, but also communication between education and industry partners, which in various different ways has been discussed. And I think both things are really central to our purpose. Collaboration, so examples like the Digital Schoolhouse, Emma Smith's Legacy Project, Emma Limpin's curriculum design collaboration with a studio. I myself have been running a project which is bringing studios into the university and giving 2-week work experience programs digitally. So, you know, these kinds of collaborations are so valuable, and I think we can do much more of them. And then creativity. I think there's been so much creativity in response to COVID challenges, finding innovative ways to compromise and invent new ways of doing things together. So those 3 kind of pillars maybe might, as a proposal, be useful. Communication, collaboration, and creativity could perhaps be, you know, a way of attacking the thing next time round. But anyway, I think it's been a wonderful event and so much to take back with us.
Wonderful, thank you, Sharon. You slightly jumped ahead, but that's okay because you've kind of kicked off a number of ideas we'll come back to very shortly. Paul, tell us some your takeaways from the day.
Wow, what an interesting day. Thank you for inviting me. Wow, where do I start? I've got a list, again, other people have got lists, and so have I, and in no particular order. I think what struck me is innovation and the speed of adoption of new technologies, new ways of working. I dare say some of these things would have been adopted, but possibly over a time span of 10 years. There would have been some experiments in industry, in companies and in universities. The ones that would have been probably seen as being more radical and more experimental. But overnight, we've had to adopt these things. Literally overnight, in the space of 1 week, the university has had to move all the students out and then find a completely different way of reaching them. And that's just been an incredible shift that the university system has had to adopt, and has been forced to adopt. So that's one big thing. It's fantastic to hear stories of how other universities, and industry companies are getting on with that. The other thing that struck me as well is it's easy to become isolated in a situation like this. So as an academic working with a small team of other academics, it's easy to become insular. But an event like this allows participants to see that they're not on their own, that there are other things going on, that other people are experiencing the same issues, the same problems, and coming up with the same solutions. And it's been a fantastic experience to see that, yeah, other things are happening. It's not the end of the world, and people are very, well, they're getting on with it. I think Ian said that he was struck by how universities were getting on with it. And this leads me to another issue, another point, is it's cropped up from time to time in the talks in the day, is how are some of these changes, are they going to be permanent? And if so, which ones? Well, I'll let you into something here. This shift to online delivery has terrified university management. It's been a complete shift for them. Decisions and processes that usually take several years have had to come in overnight, and some of it's been experimental, some of it's been just hopeful, and it's absolutely terrified the university management system that's in place, and that certainly happened at our place. So what we've seen is the well-known and well-practiced processes that usually take place over a number of years, all that's been swept away. And how universities are run, for those people who don't know, they're run now by teams of administrators, not academics anymore. We just play a small part in a wider system. And it's that administrative system and these processes that's had to radically shift overnight, and it's terrified them. So, well, where does this lead? What I want to essentially say is that what I've seen today is there is recognition, and this is a positive, there is recognition in industry as to how this shift has affected us as higher education, and that's a really positive thing for me. There's other things here. Mental health, we've spoken about that. Mental health challenges in terms of students and staff as well. There are lots of staff with mental health issues. Sadly, a few years ago, I knew of a colleague who he committed suicide. It's affected us greatly as a body of staff, and it made us all quite aware that staff are not just robots, and that they have needs. Students have needs, but staff have needs as well. And in this COVID period, that we need to embrace the mental health thing for staff and students alike. I think that's it. I think that's all I have to say. So thank you.
Thank you. There's some really strong points in there. And finally, over to Mark to share some of the key things you'd like to get across about all these subjects.
And apologies for dropping in late. I've been stuck all day on Zoom, if anybody knows what that feels like. I think the one thing that strikes me is neither positive nor negative. I think it's the fact that there are changes and there are opportunities, which can be good or bad, and we need to actually see how these things work. I think we have had a period of rapid change which people thought was impossible, and I think that may actually help us to actually bring more change as well, because I don't think we have reached the limit in terms of what we can do. And I think possibly, now people may disagree with this, but I have had experience of academia where it's been very, very staid and very much not wanting to change, to the extent that, you know, the university I went to still used terms which were in Latin, and it happens. But I think there are chances now to say to people, okay, last year we couldn't do this. Now we've achieved all of this. Can we look at bringing this somewhere else? Can we look at reassessing the entire methodology of teaching? Can we look at the way in which courses are run? Should they be 3-year courses? Should they be longer courses? This is one of the things, if you can't teach ethics in a 3-year course, should the course be longer? Again, this is one of the things which it has impacts for the economics of universities and has impacts for the government and the way in which they want to address things. I was at a meeting last year with the animation industry, and a government representative was saying, well, because of, again, in this case, it was Brexit, we're going to be very short on people to work in animation. 60% of the animation industry are from Europe. So the person from the Department of Industry suggested that we could actually give people degrees in 2 years, whereas French universities are now going to 5 years to actually produce the best animators in the world. I think as well, we can look at the entire model of assessment, which in some ways is at odds with the way in which industry works. Industry is not looking for individual achievers. Industry is looking for people that work well together. And I know that people have these kind of group projects within universities, but it is a difficult thing for universities to do. And I think it's something which could be worked on. And again, this is just coming from the one point of, we have made so much change in a short period of time. Can we keep on going? Can we push it a bit further? Can we actually do something more with this? Keep the momentum. I think the situation today it's far better than I thought it would have been when this started. And I think that's down to the hard work and the flexibility of all the people who've been working in education. And I think it's evidenced by all the people who are here, all the people who are listening, all the people who've contributed. This kind of event is absolutely fantastic for sharing both the successes and the failures, because there's no such thing as an unsuccessful experiment. The data you get from the experiment will be useful no matter what. And I think that's what these things are really great for. And I think it would be great to continue a forum of some kind to share the experiences throughout the entire industry of how you've approached certain problems and how those things have changed, what benefits, what has been detrimental, how you've addressed digital poverty and real poverty, how you've addressed mental health. I think in some format, whether it's a user group or a Slack channel or something, to continue the dialogue on a very real basis, because we learn as much from each other as we do from, you know, the teachers above us, but we are the teachers. We need to learn from each other, and I don't think we have any other recourse but to share this information, which, you know, this has been fantastic for it, but I will remember things which are more important to say tomorrow, which I'm sure you all will. So yeah, it's a fantastic event, really, really valuable, but we need to keep this going.
Yes, thank you so much, Mark. And I mean, that is a lovely segue into the reason why we use Discord, because the Discord channel will live on, and we'll open it up to those who didn't buy a ticket. We'll put all the videos to all the sessions up there. And my sense from GamesEd19 was that what happened behind the scenes was that you had a number of working groups that sort of sprung up. Some of them convened by BGI, some that just moved forward fast on their own speed and have been doing a lot of work in this area. And I think our vision for GamesEd is that we can come back in, well, now it's 6-8 months time in the spring, and that we can start to look at what's been achieved in the gap. And I'm going to take Alan's question from Discord and ask that of all of you, which is, what one problem would you love, would the panel love to have solved by the time we get to GamesEd 2021, which is quite soon, but let's see, what do you think we could, as a group, we could solve? Who wants to take that first? Paul.
Yeah, thank you. It's an extension to what I've just mentioned, actually. It's about the collaboration between industry and HE, and the understanding. What I saw today is like-minded people all being, well, sharing experiences. But there seemed to be some understanding as to what happened on both sides. But that's not always the case. You get people in universities who have absolutely no idea what the industry is, and I suppose it's the same the other way. So what I'd like to see as a solution, and this might not be an immediate thing, is this coming together, not just to understand what graduates should be, but understanding university processes and procedures, and then to try and get a feel, so the industry gets a feel for how long these things take, how people work in our field, and how best to utilize this to everybody's advantage. So more more staff to staff collaboration is something that I would encourage.
Fantastic. Who wants to pick up on that question?
I suppose I would kind of just carry on what Paul has just said, and if there was one thing I suppose that would be great for everybody to do in the interim time is maybe if you are a studio, reach out to an educator, and if you're an educator, reach out to a studio and just collaborate on something in some way. Just one, you know, one act like that could just begin something and a relationship, because one of the things that I think we've talked about today quite a lot is relationships of one kind or another, and how difficult it is to, you know, establish relationships. And this event is a really great way of beginning a relationship. And I think if everybody could just do that one gesture from one side to the other, it would be a great success, and we could just all talk about it when we got together next time. But yes, I think it would be great.
Yeah, I'd just say as well, if anybody's sort of sitting there thinking, well, I think someone said it earlier, I think it was Meg that said that if she was going to input on people's curriculums, then she wouldn't know where to start. And I kind of sympathised with that and thought, well, yeah, what do? You can't just pick up the phone and start wading into people's kind of lives, if you like. But if people are struggling to know where to start, then by all means get in touch with us. With we've tried to create that bridge between academia and the games industry with the Careers Talk Tour, with the competitions, and we'll give you a way to actually impact and input into many courses, maybe not just one, or we can get you in touch with just one. So again, we can easily facilitate that if you want to come to one place rather than start some sort of wild goose chase, then by all means give us a shout and we can help on that.
I think just to also build on that a little bit, just to make something a bit more actionable, but to start that collaboration, maybe in a more general sense, like maybe a shared lexicon, because you hear these words like learning objectives, outcomes, you know, when someone from the industry looks at those words, they don't really know what that means. So, and it could be the same, I'm not quite sure what, but the same the other way around with specific industry terms that are so socialized within us that educators might not know. So I think that's something that we can help build if we build, that's a big thing that we can build together and just be like, this is what we mean when we talk about these things. Because, you know, for a producer, I might be talking about my sprints, but for an educator, I'm just like, well, how do I make that? How do I teach that in a way that I can split that into objectives and outcomes? So yeah, I think that's probably my one action, probably skipping ahead there.
I think for me, Rick, sorry to come in on my one thing, I think it'd probably be to go back to the apprenticeship stuff, which I mentioned earlier, which I think Matt and Arthur and the guys have managed to create internships and apprentices, but they've not used the, if you like, the government funded apprenticeship system, which makes it all the more astounding in a way. But I think that is something that I know is ongoing in various sort of conversations. Myself and Jake from Sumo are involved with the level 7 programming apprenticeship that's started. That's probably a good 12 months away from completion, I would think, but Jake knows more than I do. I'd love to see that receive a bit more support. I know Jake needs more developers to come on board and help with that trailblazer. That will be a good starting point. And I think that, I've said this last year, I think that the apprenticeship system for me is a massive key to unlocking the diversity problem that the games industry has got. I think it's hugely underestimated, the amount of people that are lost to the games industry because we've got the barrier of sort of university education. If we can break that down, I think we'll encourage far more people from different backgrounds, people that are a far more diverse workforce that would be educated and then find their way into games. Nothing against universities, we work with them all the time and they're brilliant, but I think we do need more channels and more routes in. So apprenticeships for me is the key to that. So I'd love to see a little bit more sort of output from the stuff that's going on for next year.
Thank you. One thing I could say from the BGI's point of view is that what was really interesting in GamesEd19 was that we had some really feisty debates with an industry perspective seemingly at odds with the perspective of educational institutions. And in fact, what emerged when you got past some of the sort of hard positions that people were taking last year is that there's loads of collaboration that goes on. It's just point to point. It will be one studio working with the 2 or 3 universities that they recruit from, and they get really close and they start to influence curriculum and vice versa. And of course, all of the students on those courses start to get insights into how that company or local games companies who recruit from them operate and what they're after. And that is a very positive relationship. But actually this is happening much more widely than commonly is acknowledged or even known. And so one of the things that I want to do for the BGI, but on everyone's behalf, is start to map those, because I think those collaborations, those schemes, whether they're highly local or whether they're online and available to everyone, are not very well signposted to the public, or to studios, or to schools, or indeed in some cases to the universities. And so that's a project that we have in our goals for this financial year, if we survive COVID, to get that up and running and available. So that's my takeaway, is I hope that we'll be able to do some mapping exercise and bring that to, in some form of a prototype, to GamesEd21. One statistic that really struck me the other week, which plays into a theme that the panelists have just picked up around technology poverty and internet poverty, is that families from deprived backgrounds are 3 months behind in their education as a result of COVID, and that gets more severe if those families are BAME, and particularly for BAME boys. And I wondered what our overlapping sectors of games education and games development might be able to do to address that challenge. And I'm not talking about commitments to throw money at it, but what are ways that we could inspire those young people, particularly from those communities, to re-engage with education and to use the strength of our, I always call it the recruiting sergeant of video games, to re-engage young people with their education?
I think the best way that you can inspire people is to show them people from similar backgrounds who have actually achieved, and that has always worked. And there's even statistical evidence to show that, again, an American high school experiment where they told 2 groups of high school students, one group they told them about the story about a great football player, and the other told about a person who became an astronaut. The group that told that one of the ex-students had become an astronaut did better in maths and science, because they actually saw somebody from their background, their high school, had excelled in this, and they believed they could do it. So I think bringing the people who are, and we have great exemplars of these people in the industry, bring them and ask them if they would be able to present. I think we should aim to have a decent representation in all of our shows, not just in this kind of event, which it's pretty well represented, but in GDC, in any other games environment. Annecy Animation Festival had a target that by 2020 they wanted to have 50-50 male-female representation. That's for directors and for people who were speaking on technical aspects. And they met that, even though they didn't have a physical conference this year. So I think, again, a certain amount of targeting in that way can help, but not tokenism, but just bringing things back to where they should be in terms of representation.
No, I think it's something, certainly I would echo that. I think we run the Game Dev Heroes initiative, for example, and I think we actively try to make sure that we have a balance, whether it's judges and whether it's on the panel that make the decisions, and we don't force any results, and we don't sort of make anything up, but we just try and make sure that we've got a balanced panel. And it's the same with Search for a Star and the kind of the people that we're trying to put in front of students during the during the Getting the Game tour this year, then we are working harder ourselves to try to find a balance. And sometimes it's not easy finding whether it's females, whether it's people from a different ethnic background. But I think it is on us to try a little bit harder to try and eke out these people that are there, because they are there. And in some areas, we're all aware that the numbers are lower in certain areas. Certainly when it comes to things like finding female programmers, for example, is very tough, but it can be done. And I think we're certainly making more efforts to do that, because if we don't, then, well, they only see one type of role model, whether it's to encourage more black people.
Something else that goes intrinsically with that is mentorship. And I think that can be really, really valuable.
I should say that Women in Games Ambassadors and the UK Video Games Ambassador schemes do some fantastic work doing exactly that. And I forget which of our panelists last year had this lovely phrase, if you can see it, you can be it, about seeing someone who looks like you. And then it just changes imperceptibly how you think of your future if you can see someone who looks like you doing something that inspires
Absolutely, it does.
Any other thoughts on reaching that very hard to reach audience?
Yeah, I'd just like to say, I just want to come back to what Mark just said about being inspirational. Dare I say this, and it might be controversial, universities don't want just another recruitment talk. We want something more than that. And it's that. I think Mark hit the nail on the thing straight away. To demonstrate to other people, this is what I've done, you could do this. And it's that. That's what we need.
I think famously, in my experience, it's always very funny because we get our graduates to come back and speak to our current students, and often we have, you know, visitors from industry, and you know, and now we'll have them digitally. But nothing speaks to young people like another young person. So I can tell students all kinds of things endlessly until I'm blue in the face. And when somebody of their own generation comes along and says it to them, they'll come to me after and say, I didn't, you know, you never told me that, you know, you never said. But actually, you know, that's hugely, I agree with Paul and with Mark. I think that nothing speaks to young people better than young people, which is why I also felt that we all agreed that that Jake's case study students who, you know, talked about their experiences was very powerful. They were so articulate and so sure of themselves that I think that their communication, their way of talking about their own experiences was just invaluable. And I think that we could do an awful lot more of that. And it does raise somebody's, you know, morale. They feel, okay, I can, you know, because at the moment morale is often very low with students. I know in our graduating cohort, people were very sad and depressed and upset that they couldn't graduate and couldn't celebrate their degree, and felt very lost, and perhaps that they were going to end up jobless. And I don't think that's going to happen, because as we've all said today, you know, the games industry has been flourishing in difficult times. But their morale needs to be raised, and other people doing the jobs that they would love to do, talking to them directly and confidently about their experiences. There's nothing like that for you know, injecting optimism and enthusiasm in young people who might not see themselves, as you say, Rick, you know, they might not see themselves in other ways.
So can I take that just naturally on to the next question, which is, where are we going to find those young people to do those Zoom talks to schools that can represent their communities and show that sort of positive role model? Well, is that something that we should be looking to the big studios who've got enough of a cohort and who will have some more diverse developers? Is that a program that we need to persuade the larger employers to start to run? I think, or are they doing it already and we just don't know?
If we can collaborate together, I think universities who have graduates in companies and companies who have their graduates can collaborate together. And if we could coordinate that, we could provide really great you know, videos that can be distributed digitally so freely. You know, we could get the videos shown in universities to students, but we can also get them shown much more widely to a much younger audience, which I think today we've all acknowledged is really important, you know, to go back before pre-everything, pre-university, pre-FE, you know, right back to very young children who can see that there is a possible career that's fascinating, and particularly young girls who get squeezed out of STEM subjects, you know, for unconscious bias reasons. You know, they are often, you know, as Emma, who was one of the students I was mentioning, you know, she had done a degree in fashion because her school had said to her, well, you're very good at art and design, why don't you do fashion? Rather than telling her, well, you're very good at, you know, tech subjects and you're very good at art and design, why don't you have a look at games, you know, because that seems a very logical career for you to take. So I think if we could collaborate together, universities and studios, I think we could set up a really fantastic resource that could be used and reused over time. It would be great.
Certainly seems to be the chance to do it. I mean, obviously you've got the whole getting the game and the grads in games journey that's going digital now. So I mean, there's a vehicle there which is going to be used to put content about careers and about CVs and about portfolios, and also just about inspiring students to get into the games industry. So there's certainly a format there, and you've got Aurora, you've got your channel, which is a learning channel, I think, which goes to students, and Mark, you guys have got the same. So it's not as if there aren't the platforms there. I think it's probably taking that content and repurposing it across those different platforms. I think sometimes the difficulty with finding these role models is getting the right people from the studios. I think it's our responsibility, certainly here, to be saying to studios, well, we don't just want talks from tech directors and art directors and going after kind of, if you like, maybe more knowledgeable people and more senior people that we think are going to be big names. I think it's maybe trying to eke out the people at the partner studios that we've got that might be representative of different backgrounds. And we can certainly do that. I think sometimes it's getting these people to come forward from within studios as well. So maybe there's a double barrier there, because I know for a fact that there are studios that have got people that could represent those groups, but they don't necessarily, or they're not the ones that come forward to take part in things, or maybe they're not encouraged to come forward. I don't know, but it's obviously a problem that we can try to solve, and we can try and get more younger people into that content that we're going to put in front of your students, Sharon, and your students, Paul, via the Getting the Game talks this year. So we'll certainly try and get a bit more youth in there and try and make that as diverse as possible.
I think it's something around the patchwork quilt of all the different initiatives that are out there and pulling them together and then cross-promoting is what an old client of mine used to call more doors into the store. Except the store here is actually, it's more diverse candidates into our sector, which can only have benefits in every sense, economically, as well as content, as well as working environment, and so on. So I think I'm inspired that with this event, we're laying the foundation, and we can start to take some of these inspirational programs and start to cross-promote them and weave them all together and multiply. So we're kind of getting close to the very end of the day, and I'd just like to ask you to think about GamesEd21. Sharon, you've already jumped the gun and given us some fantastic and beautifully condensed ideas around that. Who else would like to pick up some other topics that we can pick up in next year? Okay, it's probably that end of the day, so that's
sorry.
That is fine. Well, I'm sure that there is a technical phrase that I haven't found online, which is burnout via Zoom, but we may well all be subject to that. I certainly am feeling it slightly, completely letterboxes through my...
Maybe the only thing, Rick, is I think something that perhaps cropped up last year, and I think we tried to resolve it a little bit this year, but obviously COVID has impacted us being able to do we were going to do the FE showcase, I think, this year as part of the conference. So that would have been great I think we'd have had the kids, for example, that were the interns and the kids from Priestley College, for example, and other FE colleges. But I think just to reiterate for next year, I think what we said previously last year is that we wanted more students to be involved if possible. So I think maybe just to throw that back in and just make sure it doesn't get lost in terms of for next year, is to try and get more really good case studies and heroes, if you like, and people that can inspire other students. Make sure that we get them involved for next year when we're hopefully all back together.
Yeah, and I should say that we were going to have, in the physical event, we were going to have a showcase in the lobby where all of the delegates could walk around and see, you know, this amazing quality. I mean, you get this when you go to a Next Gen Skills Academy sort of expo, and you think, hold on, what, you're 17, you're 18, how did you manage to have just amazing quality? I'm sure we would have seen that. And I would love us to do that next time in person. It may be that there is a strand that that brings more of the students into play, and there's a lot to be discussed logistically, but that's certainly something that our steering committee can pick up and run with.
I think if there's more of a maybe shining a light on those working groups that have popped up, and if there's any case studies around that we could highlight of the collaborations that have come from, you know, even from last year. I mean, it can be it doesn't have to be from the previous year, it can be from when it started.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, no, I think we can definitely do that. There are lots of initiatives that were kicked off. And there'll be others that come out of the woodwork. I mean, we've got a lot of inspirational third sector organisations that are helping to kind of bridge that gap. And I'm particularly thinking into games and Next Gen, UK and Tiger, as well as us at BGI. So I think that there are definitely opportunities there to talk about that work together. So I think I was going to throw you a final question, but I'm sensing burnout might get the same response. So I'm going to bring our summit to an end, and I want to do that with a massive thank you. First to our sponsors. Without Unity, without Unreal, without Grads and Games and AIM Awards, we wouldn't be here today. We wouldn't have been able to put this on. Thank you so much for sticking with us through a big schedule change. It's hugely appreciated. I'd also like to thank all of our panelists. We've had a lot of people sharing some serious time, but also really wonderful ideas with our community, and I'm grateful to all of you who have contributed. Behind the scenes is a team of people at Mimram Media and some of my BGI people who have been doing a great job in making this work seamlessly. So thank you very much to them. And finally, I just want to remind you that Discord is the place. We will have all the videos up within a week, I hope, for all of the different sessions for people to go in and mine. I would encourage you to sign up if you haven't to the Discord channel. And leave your details so that those collaborations, that is a good launch point for future collaborations before the next one. Yeah, a big thank you to all of our moderators who have guided us through the day. So thanks all. I will leave you to a quiet evening and look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks very much.
Stay safe, everyone.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Bye.
Thanks a lot. Bye.